And then boom, here it is. It's red, it's negative. I don't know why I'm so happy about a negative comment. Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'll be taking you through a step-by-step guide in creating a sentiment analysis tool, all based in the cloud. In this guide I'll be covering creating, reading, updating and deleting Firestore documents, as well as how to write a Google Cloud function. I'll also be covering the speech API in Google Cloud. Enough talking, what does this app do? Well, when you enter a comment, it analyzes whether it's a positive or negative comment. It calls it green if it's positive, red if it's negative, and orange if it's in between. So let's add a comment. I love this tutorial, it's awesome. I'll click submit, it's loading, it's checking the sentiment, and then boom, it goes green. It's positive, we love it. If I love the comment enough, I can go and click like. This updates the document with the like boolean. I can then refresh the page and it'll stay there. Awesome. If I don't like the comment anymore, I can actually go and delete it by clicking this little bin icon here, and then it's gone forever. Let's take a look at the architecture. When a comment is made in the React UI, it gets added to a Cloud Firestore. There's a Cloud function listening on creation. So this comment is actually passed then to the sentiment analysis tool here. It then calculates sentiment as a sentiment analysis score and passes it back to the Firestore comment. The UI is actually listening to all of the documents, so when it gets updated in the Firestore, it's automatically updated in the UI. It's super simple. Before we jump into the code, you need to set up a new Firebase project. Let's do that now. Cool. Now that we're in our Firebase, we need to set up Firestore. Let's do that now. Let's go to Build, Firestore Database, and let's click Create Database. And we can start it in test mode. And click Next. Choose your closest region and click Enable. After some time, your Firestore database will have built and you're ready to go. Now we need to enable Firebase functions. To do that, let's go to Build and click Functions. You might need to enable billing at this point by upgrading your project to the Blaze plan. We're not doing anything too crazy with functions, so it shouldn't cost you a penny. Now that you've enabled the Blaze plan, now it's time to jump into the code. Cool, now I'm in a bare React project. All I need to do now is just initialize it with Firebase. I can do that with Firebase in it. I want to enable Firestore and functions. Click Enter. I want to use an existing project. This is the one I made in the Firebase console, so I'll choose this one. I'll enable default for this one, and default for this one as well. For functions, I'm going to use JavaScript, and I'm going to enable ESLint. I'm going to say no to installing dependencies right now. And then that's it. Firebase is now initialized in your project. Let's actually start coding now, I promise. After running the Firebase init function, several folders and files have been created. The most important one for us right now is the index.js file in the functions folder. This is where we're going to store our Firebase function when we come to write it. So we have the Firebase settings sorted out in our project, but we need to actually create the web app in the project. So in the Firebase console, navigate to the home page and click the web icon here. Give it a name. I'm going to call it web. I'm going to register the app. It gives me a command to run. It just installs Firebase using npm. I'm going to run it. It also gives us some config. We need to actually add that into our project. So let's create a file for it. In src, create a new folder. Let's call it config. And create a file in there called firebase.js. Let's copy and paste that into here. And there we have it, sorted. And now we can close the Firebase console. Since we'll be using Firestore, we need to actually enable it. We can add this following line to the end of our file, which is going to export a DB object that we can access in other areas of our code. Because the focus of this video is the cloud, I'll be focusing mainly on the create, reading, update, and deletion of data, and less so the UI. To get to this bare bones project, you can download the source code in the description right now, so you don't have to worry about it, but we'll run through it very quickly. I'm using a HTML form to submit the data to Firestore. I've got a handle input and a handle submit function. As you can see here, I've got some to-dos, and we'll go through each of those together because that's where the meat of the functions are, with the CRUD functionality of Firestore. Let's start with the read functionality. To make my life easier, I'll be using a package called React Firebase Hooks. It makes it so much easier to request data from Firestore. Let's implement it now. I'm going to initialize 3 variables: comments, loading, and error. The comments variable is full of comments. Loading is a yes or a no, depending whether it's still loading or not. And an error is null until there actually is an error. Use collection takes a query. So let's do that now. Let's set up a query The collection I want to be using is the comments collection. I then want to order it by the timestamp it was built. And then that's it. That's how simple it is to instantiate a Firestore read function. Let's verify whether we're actually reading data from the database. I'm going to post in this snippet here. As you can see, it works, but let's go through actually how it works. The comments state is actually just a collection. We have to explicitly reference that we want the individual docs by using the .docs method on the comments collection reference. We then can use the map function to go through every single element in there and then return a JSON string. Super simple, and we can see it works. The next function we can work on is the create function. This is super easy. Let's call the add doc function. It takes two arguments, the first being a collection, and the second with the data. As you can see here, Copilot's already done the first bit for me, so let's specify the data. I want to include the comment. I also include the timestamp because I want to be able to order the comments based on when they were made. Let's give it a test. When I submit a new comment, it should automatically appear on my screen. As you can see, it works. I can also verify it in the Firebase console, as you can see here. Now, what happens if we want to delete this document? Well, all we need to do is just call the delete doc function. The delete doc function takes in just a reference to a document, and the document reference takes in two parameters. One a reference to the database, and one that reference the actual path the document sits. So our first is going to be DB, and the second will be comments with ID, like that. So once we've saved it, we can go and test it and click delete, and it's gone. Boom. We can go and check it out. It's actually been deleted, as you can see here. The handle delete function takes in one parameter, which is ID. And you're probably wondering what that is. Well, it's just this ID here. As you can see here, we've got a randomly generated ID at the top. That's what it references. And when we read documents from the Firestore collection, we can actually access those IDs, as you can see here. The final function we're dealing with is the update doc. Again, super simple. We call the update doc function. In this case, we're going to pass a reference to a document. Similar to what we did before, passing the DB, as well as an absolute reference to the document. The second parameter it takes is the information that we need to update the document with. In this case, we want to set liked to whatever the checkbox is. In this case, it's whatever the love heart is on or off. Again, we can test it. Let's like the first comment, give it a refresh, and you can see that it's still liked. It works. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's create our Google Cloud function. Let's go to the index.js file in your functions folder. Let's clear it out. Make sure the only thing in there is the functions declaration at the top of the page. So as I mentioned earlier, the way this app works is that it listens to the Firestore database and it runs a function when a document is created. In Google Cloud Functions, it's so easy to do this, and I'll start with this snippet here. Let's go through what this means. Firstly, we're defining our function called analyzeComment. We're using the functions package, and here I'm specifying the region. I'm using Europe West 2 just because it's the closest one to me. I then use .firestore to show that this function will be reacting to something in Firestore. I then pass it a reference to a document. In this case, it will be looking for any document in the comments collection with a given comment ID. This is anything that we create in our front end. The final piece of the puzzle is the onCreate method. All it does, it limits the function to only run when a document is created. As you can see in the onCreate method, it has two arguments. The first one being the snapshot, which contains the data of the document that the event was fired on. So in this case, it will contain the data of our comment. And the context just contains some information about the authentication level, who did it, time, date, but we don't really care about that right now. Let's just think back to how our comments are structured. It's got two fields, comment and timestamp. As I mentioned before, the snap argument contains the data. We can access the comment field of the comment that triggered this function with this simple line here. If we were to console log this now and check our Google Cloud Functions, every time we make a new comment, we would see that comment reflected in our logs. So let's do something interesting with this data. Because we're making a sentiment analysis tool, why don't we analyze the sentiment? It's really easy using the Google Cloud Language package, so let's do that now. In this piece of code, we're creating a new client, and then we're creating a new request for that client to execute. In this request, we're specifying the comment as the content to be analyzed, and just saying that it's plain text. So let's go and execute this request now. And boom, this is how easy it is to analyze the sentiment of some text using the cloud. Let's go through this bit now. So using the client, we're going to be calling the analyze sentiment method. We're passing the request that we specified earlier. This then block just executes that request. And then the results contain the results of the sentiment analysis. So let's analyze them now. We take the actual sentiment from the results, and then we take the score and the magnitude from that sentiment. The score represents a negative or a positive number that represents the sentiment of the text. If it's a negative number, then it's a negative content. But if it's a positive number, then it's a positive content. The magnitude is just the score without the plus or the minus. The last thing we do in this function is save the score and magnitude to the document. It's super simple because we actually have the reference here from the snap argument. And then as before, we can use the .set function and pass in the data here that we want to use. We also include merge equals to true, so as not to overwrite the comment and the timestamp. Now that we've finished writing our function, we can go and deploy it. We can use Firebase deploy to do this. In this case, we only want to deploy functions, so we can use -- only and specify functions. Let's click go. What this command does, it checks the Firebase JSON file to see where our functions are kept. In this case, they're in an index.js file in the functions folder. It then takes it, lints it, and then deploys it. All we've got to do is wait a couple of seconds for it to deploy. We'll get a nice green tick when we see that. After some time, your function will successfully deploy, so let's go and test it out now. So the main test here is when we create a new comment, it should load for a couple of seconds, and then spit out an analysis of the sentiment. Let's do that now. I hate this tutorial. It's so boring. We'll see it spin it for a couple of seconds while it's calculating the sentiment. It might need some time because it's the first time it's deployed and it'll be starting from cold, so it might take a few extra seconds. And theoretically, as soon as the score has been updated in the document, it should update in our UI. And then boom, here it is. It's red, it's negative. I don't know why I'm so happy about a negative comment, but if I hate so much, I can delete it. And it's gone and never have to see it again. And there you have it, a start to finish guide on how to build your own comment sentiment analysis tool in Google Cloud and React. I really hope you enjoyed this guide. I really enjoyed making the project and I hope you do too. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.